Good afternoon. Welcome to our Midday Mull for Thursday, the 9th of July. Continuing to read through Matthew's Gospel in chapter 19, we read the following in verse 13. Then little children were brought to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked those who brought them. Now, one can understand the disciples' perspective. Time and again in the Gospel you have the stories about how crowded Jesus is and how busy he is and the crowds that are pressing on him, and he's trying to get away and he tries to sneak across the lake and the people see him and go there. So one can completely understand the disciples' perspective. Jesus needs the space and little children aren't that important. But Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And so he says completely the opposite. No, these little children are important. Let them come. And it's interesting that Matthew then continues, and the very next story he has is of the rich young man, where we're told, now a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" And Jesus says to him, if you want to enter life, obey the commandments. And he said, "Oh, which ones?" And Jesus refers back to the 10 commandments, and the man said, "All these I have kept since I was young. What do I still lack?" In verse 21, Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sad, because he had great wealth. And Jesus lets him go. He doesn't say, "Well, actually, you only have to sell half your stuff, or we can negotiate, or it's not that important." He lets him go. And I find it interesting that on the one hand, Matthew puts the story of the little kids who are of no account in society, and Jesus says, "Bring them to me." And right the next story has this wealthy young man, obviously a person of status and standing, one of those people you'd like to have as part of your congregation. And Jesus says to him, "The standards are quite high." And the man walks off, and Jesus lets him go. And we need to remember that God doesn't judge us the way the world does. And it doesn't matter what other people may say of us. God sees us differently. And if we sometimes feel we're of no account, or that we've come to nothing, or the world has left us behind, or we have no status, that's not how God sees it. The little children were important to him. Every single one of us is important. But we also need to be warned that no matter how important we are in the world, that importance doesn't carry forward into the kingdom. We are all on the same level in the eyes of God. And so for me, that's a great encouragement in terms of following Jesus. And it's also a challenge to me, and constantly need to pray, "God, let me see people the way you do. Let me value people the same way that you do." And that is often much, much more difficult. So there's an encouragement and a challenge for the day. Be blessed.